They don't call him the Sorcerer Supreme for nothing. Doctor Strange is an immensely powerful magic user, that's for certain. But just how far do his abilities actually reach? Superheroes get their powers from all kinds of sources, some even magical. Perhaps they have magical amulets that give them powers. Perhaps they know a particular school of magic. Or maybe they once stumbled upon a magic weapon that can do all sorts of neat things when swung correctly. But as magical as any of these power sources may be, Dr. Stephen Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme for a reason. With just how many spells he knows and how much magical knowledge he has, this guy practically is magic. And the list of abilities this grants him puts most entire superhero teams to shame. So let's just work our way up the ladder of his various abilities, starting with the somewhat mundane, going to the small-time superheroic, and straight up to the absolutely cosmically insane stuff we know and love him for. Okay, you gotta be pretty sharp to end up becoming one of the world's top surgeons, like Stephen was before he got some pretty critical hand injuries that, albeit indirectly, led to him ultimately becoming the Sorcerer Supreme. But you don't learn magic by cutting people up and stitching them back together. That stuff takes study. With his teachings from the Ancient One, Strange's knowledge stretches far beyond human anatomy and into the vast, most obscure corners of all things magical, occult, cosmic, and mythical, ensuring that he always knows what he's about to face and that he can plan the most appropriate strategy. Basically, Stephen Strange's life is one part fighting cosmic threats on every plane of existence, and many parts sitting around in his study reading every book he can to make sure he can ace whatever supernatural exam the Marvel Universe decides to throw at him next. Okay, pop quiz. You're a sorcerer. You just got in a fight and you're all out of spells. What do you do? In most cases, the answer would be run away with your tail between your legs and hope the enemy doesn't have any ranged attacks, but Doctor Strange don't play like that. Not every enemy is going to give him the time to make fancy hand gestures and summon magical bolts to save his bacon, and not every enemy really requires it. So as backup, Strange has not only a magical sword appropriately named the Scalpel of Strange, but plenty of martial arts training courtesy of the Ancient One and many hours of sparring with Wong. And among Strange's other weapons, we also find the magical Axe of Angaramus, which Strange found in a witch's crypt on the moon. Wait, hold on, a witch's crypt on the moon? Man, this dude leads a colorful life. Quick, think of the first thing most people associate with superheroes. What? No, I meant aside from the tight costumes, you pervert. Jeez, come on, I'm trying to make a serious video about comic book wizards here. Anyway, I'm betting you thought of flying. The ability to fly seems to be handed out in superhero origin stories like candy to children on Halloween, and even those that can't fly eventually find some way to fly anyway. Heck, if we take a glance over at DC, the Legion of Superheroes outright gives you flight once you sign up. It's literally just a perk of the job. But Strange's flight is unique in that it is granted to him by his Cloak of Levitation, weaved by an entity called Enitharmon the Weaver in the comics. The cloak can also be oddly temperamental at times, at least in the movies. This one is more of a passive property than a real skill or ability, but not only is Doctor Strange pretty much bound for life to be the Sorcerer Supreme, he's also gonna be alive for much longer than most Marvel superheroes. Possibly to make sure the current Sorcerer Supreme doesn't croak before a proper replacement is found, Strange has a lengthened lifespan as well as an immunity to most earthly diseases and ailments. And just to sweeten the deal a bit, he doesn't actually physically age all that much either. But it's important to note that this does not mean Strange is immortal. He will eventually die someday, and he can be killed. Magic and hand-to-hand combat is all well and good, but it's not gonna help you much if you have a glass jaw. Strange is unquestionably an incredibly powerful sorcerer, but if you somehow manage to get past all of his magical nonsense and plant a superpowered right hook in his face, he's likely to go down for the count. And that's why fighters have shields, baby. This is one we see him use all the time in the movies. These protective magical discs are capable of deflecting just about everything from physical hits and elemental attacks to cosmic rays and other magical bolts, helping to make sure that the good doctor stays in the game and can keep on blasting. Earth, fire, wind, water. Insert your own Captain Planet or Last Airbender gags here. The first thing many will think of when they imagine high fantasy magic is the ability to call upon the elements to strike down your enemies. Don't think I don't see you fellow D&D nerds out there with your spell sheets full of fireballs, rays of frost, and storm spheres. But yeah, what kind of Sorcerer Supreme would Strange really be if he couldn't put you on ice, thaw you up, and then throw lightning at your face? It's not something we see all that often in the movies, probably because it's just that much cooler to see Stephen throw around some less easily definable magical forces, but nonetheless, he is an elemental master, and it does come in handy against enemies with certain properties and weaknesses, that's for sure. But then what about everyone else? Boom, baby! That's where those iconic mystical bolts come into play. The sight of Strange flying around and blasting anyone who dares to step to him with pure raw magical energy is just such a treat to watch and practically synonymous with the character at this point. To draw another parallel to Dungeons & Dragons, this is like Stephen's take on a basic magic attack a la magic missile. It's just a way more powerful singular blast. And let's be real here, they just look super cool. Teleportation, much like flight, is one of those dime a dozen superpowers, especially once we start moving into the magical, alien, or cosmic territories that Strange likes to hang out in. Sure, there are heroes out there who make teleportation their one trick and do it extremely well. Hey Nightcrawler, how you doing? But Stephen takes it a couple steps further than just going into the next room or teleporting to somewhere else on Earth. You see, the Marvel universe is absolutely vast. There's much more to worry about than just our little planet, our solar system, or even our galaxy. Space is huge and very, very populated in Marvel, and good old Doc Strange is able to zip all over it in many different ways. Maybe he simply summons a portal, maybe he bends reality to his whim, or maybe he uses one of the many hidden teleportation doors in the Sanctum Sanctorum. Regardless of how he travels, it sure beats waiting around for the other heroes to have a spaceship ready, don't it? Oh, but we're not done. No. Once we move past little things like time itself and a vast universe housing many galaxies and alien planets, we start dipping our toes into other entire planes of existence, like the Dark Dimension, the Divine Realm, and the Dream Dimension, just to mention a couple. And Strange can teleport to all of them to fight off whatever is trying to break through to our realm, or even to resolve conflicts between realms that we here on Earth aren't even aware of. You think Spider-Man is busy protecting New York? That Namor has enough on his plate protecting the world's oceans? Or that the Avengers and the Fantastic Four have their hands full protecting the planet while folks like the Nova Corps or the Guardians of Galaxy roam across space? Try having to be the guy who has to babysit several entire planes of existence just to make sure they all play nice. And here's a little pro tip for you aspiring dimensional travelers out there. It's usually a good idea to know a thing or two about the realm you're visiting. That's where Doctor Strange's universal awareness comes into play. You're not going to survive for too long in places like the Dream Realm, Hell, or even the Nightmare World without knowing a thing or two about how things work around there, who the head honcho is, and what kind of creatures will be all too eager to snap you in half if they spot you. His knowledge stretches beyond just studying the places in written accounts though, as he can use meditation and other mystical means to learn even more about them should he need to. And believe me, he needs to if he wants to keep his head on his shoulders. Now this is where being the Sorcerer Supreme and having access to millions of spells starts getting really fun. You know that thing about Strange needing a bit of combat training and having magical shields so he can ward off physical damage? Well, he has other tricks up his sleeve, such as outright becoming intangible, which is another thing that he has many different ways of pulling off. Whether he's just straight up shadowcatting his way through an attack or teleporting between dimensions and existential planes so quickly that he becomes impossible to hit or properly catch, Strange quickly becomes an absolute nightmare to deal with for anyone who's trying to win by simply decking him in the face. So let me get this straight. He can move through objects in more ways than Kitty Pryde. He can teleport to an absolutely ludicrous extent, far beyond what Nightcrawler could ever hope for. He can fly. He can throw all elements around instead of just one. Let's see, are there any other X-Men we can render obsolete? Oh, I know. How about Jean Grey and basically every single telekinetic expert and telepath in the Marvel universe? Strange has access to pretty much all the same abilities that any powerful mentally superhero you can think of does, from reading minds to communicating telepathically or even seeing through illusions. And just to top it off, he can create concussive blasts of mental energy too. Though, strictly speaking, he does so via the magical properties of the Eye of Agamotto rather than possessing any actual mental powers. So maybe the telepaths of the Marvel Universe can rest easy after all. From one school of psychic superpowers to another, Strange doesn't just read minds or make stuff float like your garden variety telepath. He's also an actual psychic, as in the kind that can look into the future. But why stop there? As demonstrated in Infinity War, Stephen can see not just the immediate future, but also the many possible outcomes of any conflict, which is why he was so rattled when he saw thousands of timelines where Thanos absolutely obliterated the Avengers. Given how many possibilities he can see, not finding a single one where they win just shouldn't be possible. Now, why he apparently doesn't use this ability before Peter manages to screw up his reality-altering spell in the upcoming Spider-Man No Way Home is beyond me, but I'm sure it'll come in handy for the rest of that movie. And in Multiverse of Madness. Now, what would a mystically empowered character be without a little ability known as Astral Projection? He doesn't even need to sit down and meditate for a while in order to make this one happen. Strange is able to instantaneously eject his spirit from his body and send it off to do various tasks, mostly some manner of reconnaissance. And it's damn effective too, what with moving at the literal speed of thought and being capable of ignoring physics and thus flying all over the universe. It's also impervious to harm except from the most powerful of mystic forces he may encounter. And even though he's invisible to the naked eye in this form, he can become visible to relay messages to his allies if he needs to. And would you look at that, he can still use the Eye of Agamotto in this state too. And as long as his physical body remains undisturbed, he can stay in this form for as long as he damn well pleases. But going from the mental to the physical, we're starting to move into the really OP stuff that Strange can do. Such as, you know, pulling any object seemingly out of thin air whenever he needs it. Thanks to a little art known as object conjuration, just to use as many fancy words as I can think of, Stephen can basically just make himself a handy dandy little portal and grab any item he needs at that moment. And this is good for way more than just making sure you have booze ready whenever an unexpected Asgardian guest drops by. He can just as easily use it to fetch any magical relic he happens to own or know the right location of, in case all these fancy powers we're going through right now somehow aren't enough to deal with the magic threat of the week. You know, as a video editor, I get so accustomed to having a pause button that I sometimes forget I don't have one in real life. Just imagine how convenient that would be. Well, lo and behold, Stephen does. In the MCU at least, the aforementioned Eye of Agamotto is the container for the Time Stone, giving it the ability to manipulate time by stopping and starting it at will, or even create time loops. Which, as you might remember, was how he defeated Dormammu in his own movie, basically annoying the demonic entity into surrender by forcing it to have to kill him over and over again for all of eternity. The Eye does have limited time manipulation abilities in the comics as well, but it's mostly able to sort of twist time around a singular object rather than outright stop all of time itself. He can't use this ability to outright travel through time though, so at least there's one power the Doc doesn't have easy access to. Yet. Sometimes you just don't want to deal, you know? You're fighting magical baddie number 5 this week, you're tired of throwing magic bolts and witty banter at it, and you just want to go home and relax by your arcane fire with a good eldritch grimoire and a bottle of mystical wine. Really, the thing you want to do the most is just tell whoever you're fighting to screw off and leave you alone. Surprise, surprise, Strange can do exactly that. Being the Sorcerer Supreme, he can banish a being from his sight, not just to somewhere else on the planet, but even to other planets, dimensions, realms, planes, or wherever you can imagine. The one catch to this ability that keeps it from being a total game breaker is that the one he uses it on has to be less powerful than him. But that still makes it a neat way to avoid any meaningless fights he would have won effortlessly anyway. Sometimes throwing around ice, fire, lightning, or vaguely defined magical energies just doesn't quite do the trick to knock down whatever Strange is currently fighting, and it needs a little bit of a boost to do any real damage. That's where Strange starts calling for help, not from a nearby friend or some other wizards that happen to be around, but from the very universe itself. Draining power out of the unknown elements existing all across the universe, Strange can either fire it directly or use it to amplify or focus already existing spells to give them that little bit of extra oomph. But, I hear you ask, what happens when even that isn't enough? That's where we start calling upon divine beings to boost the spells even further, of course. No fictional magic user worth their salt has ever gone through their career without at least once invoking the name of some higher being, and Strange himself is no exception. For the most part, he tends to draw his power from 3 godlike beings known as the Vishanti, but he's able to call upon other beings for assistance as well, such as a group of entities called the Octessence, and even none other than the dread Dormammu himself, one of Strange's biggest foes, patron to Baron Mordo and antagonist of the 2016 movie. But every sorcerer has that one spell they use when all else fails. That one move that can either solve the entire conflict in one blast, or mean their own certain death. Dr. Strange is no different, and if you catch him casting a little spell known as the Darkness of the Divine Conduit, you can be certain a specific kind of unmentionable bodily waste just hit the fan. The Darkness of Divine Conduit allows Strange to, by sheer force of will, take all the power of the entity he faces for himself and cast them out of their own realm, destroying them for good. But, of course, it comes with an equally high risk. Doing this causes Strange to not just take that entity's duties upon himself, but also absorb their mind. And should he lose his sense of self, he will completely cease to exist. Hey folks, I'm Bjarke Johansen, and I'm the guy who made this video. Feel free to tell me about whatever spells I missed in the comments below, or hit me up on Twitter, cause the dude knows a lot of spells. Like, I'm pretty certain I missed at least some on this list.